Right, guys, today we are going to be talking about the most effective ways that you can track and measure your progress with your fat loss. And it is one of the key areas that you must have in place. Otherwise, you're never going to get sustainable fat loss results. Right? It's one of the 4 key areas. I'll put a link to that video in the comments or the description, wherever it's blooming called below, and you can go view that video. But number 4 of that is just being consistent and measuring your progress, right? So I've got my notes, I've got my best bits here on how to do it. So we're going to open up the whiteboard of truth and I'm just going to start jotting them down. So number 1 is body weight. So we'll call that BW. Oh, before we get into it, and you might be saying to yourself, well, I don't want to have to track. My grandpa from 55 years ago, he didn't have to track any of his stuff and he was great when he was 60, 70 years old. That's awesome. But did your granddad also have to contend with being sedentary, having an iPhone, staying up late, Xbox addiction, YouTube addiction, foods and food companies and corporations that are out there to kill you and destroy your goals? No. Okay. So it's important that we have some form of tracking in our day-to-day lives in the 21st century. It's the only way we can do it. And you don't have to do all these things, right? You don't have to go and like literally go out and start doing everything, right? That's ridiculous. Just pick the few that you think will be the most important for you, and I'll give my recommendations as well. So first one, BW, body weight. You want to be weighing every single day in the morning, after you've had a poo or a wee, before you have breakfast. Every day, no exception, regardless, okay? The reason we don't want to weigh in once per week is because you're fucking up your results, your progress, right? You might weigh on a Wednesday morning 80.4 kilos. The following week, you might weigh in 80.5 kilos. However, if you were to weigh in every single day of each of those corresponding weeks, you might find that the second week, you've actually lost weight, even though if you're comparing 2 days to each other, it appears that you gained weight, right? So many people I see do this wrong and try and weigh in once per week when there's just not enough data doing that once, right? You need to make sure that you're getting loads and loads of data points so that you can actually see that you're progressing. You know, there could be so many things that destroy your progress on one day. You eat too many carbohydrates, you have a food or a meal that's high in sodium, you've eaten too much fiber, you've got too much food in your gut. Too many variables are going to fuck up your results, right? So make sure you're getting more data points, weigh in every single day, take an average, and that is your true weight. All right. Number 2 is, we're going to call it CICO. So that basically means calories in, calories out. But the calories part of that is the most important thing. You want to be tracking your calories. You want to have some idea and understanding of how many calories are in certain foods and how much you're allowing yourself, right? So many people think they're eating in a deficit or think they're eating in a diet, when in reality, they're eating loads of calories, whether it's hidden from dietary fat or they're not counting the subconscious food that's going into their mouths. Really, you have to understand and be really vigilant of the amount of food that's going in and drink as well, so that you can actually see with the data. I mean, I'm telling you, the data doesn't lie to you whether you're actually progressing or not, right? Now, what I will say about tracking calories is that it does take a little bit of time. And the first time you do it, if you haven't done it before, it's going to take 15 to 20 minutes. That's just to register the food and just scanning barcodes. All these things does take time, right? But once you do it over and over and over and over again, over time, it's going to take you literally 10 minutes. Right now, in the mornings, I track my calories, and whilst the kettle is boiling and I'm brewing my tea bag, it takes literally 5 minutes to track everything that I have, right? Now, that's not going to be the same case for every time that I do it, because sometimes I'll go out and have food in restaurants or I'll be traveling. In those cases, yeah, it might take a little bit longer, but it's worth it over the long term, right? So have some form of calorie tracking, whether it's a phone app or you're writing it down, ideally the phone app, because I think it's quicker, but understand the food and the drink that's going in. You don't have to track everything. Perhaps things that aren't high in calorie values, like diet drinks or low calorie sprays, you can leave. Right, next, fat calipers. Now, these are basically calipers that you plug onto different parts of your body, and you basically pinch the fat around, say, the chest, and you take a measurement on the fat caliper. What that will do is it will have like a little marking on the actual fat caliper itself, and you basically it will tell you roughly what your body fat percentage is. Now, I don't personally use these. I used to, but I just found them really faffy and too much of an effort. They're really unreliable because you have to pinch the exact same amount of fat each time. And plus, if you're an overweight guy as well, you're going to have a lot of fat. And some of these fat calipers won't register on the actual fat caliper itself how much weight you're at, right? So I personally avoid these. But if you're leaner, if you're like 15% body fat, you might want to consider using some fat calipers. And I think they're quite cheap as well. Right, next, tape measure. Tape measure. So literally, I might have one here actually. Yes, I do. Isn't that exciting? Tape measure. Costs you like £3 on Amazon. You are going to measure key components of your body. So your chest, you can measure your arms, you can measure your waist, you can measure your glutes, you can measure your thighs. But you are going to want to do this every 4 to 6 weeks. You don't want to do it any more than that because you're unlikely to see much change. So don't worry about doing it every week, every couple of weeks. Diary it on and make sure you do it every 4 to 6 weeks to get a true reflection. All right, next one. Big one that I know a lot of you aren't doing. Training. Must be tracking your training. Otherwise, how do you know if you are progressing? So whether it's you're tracking your reps, your sets, the weight, how consistent you are with those, your actual sessions, your cardio, your whatever it is, your steps even, all these things, you should have some form of idea of what you're doing, right? There's no point in just going to the gym and guessing your way and not knowing whether you've actually improved and gotten stronger, which is the key to long-term sustainable fat loss. You have to, in some form or another, get stronger over time. You must have an idea of this, right? There are plenty of phone apps that can track this, and really you are shooting yourself in the foot if you're not seeing if you're getting better over time. Now, this one I would say is probably the one that's going to take you the longest. I would recommend on the weekends when you've got 5-10 minutes, just doing it then and kind of tracking into like a spreadsheet how much you've actually improved over time, right? Next one. Let's go up here now. BMI, body mass index. So body mass index, this takes your weight, it divides it by your height, and then you square that, okay? Weight divided by height squared. Or just use a website like the NHS one for us UK folk, right? Really simple. And what this is it basically determines you into 4 categories. It determines whether you're underweight, at a normal weight, overweight, or obese. And obviously, for most of us, I would say you probably want to be aiming for the normal, healthy weight range. Now, I've created a blog post and I've done an article on the 4 categories, which is loosely based on the BMI scale. But basically, the problem with the BMI scale is that it can be quite inaccurate. If you are a guy with a lot of muscle mass, it can't detect whether the weight that you have is muscle mass or fat mass, right? And obviously muscle is going to be a lot healthier than stored adipose tissue or visceral fat that's surrounding your organs, right? Which is the bad stuff. So it can't determine and decipher which one's which. So it can be quite bad for those that are quite athletic or already have quite a sizable frame on their body. Now, if you are starting out and you know that you don't have not healthy, that's probably the wrong word. You don't have a heavy muscle bound frame, then yeah, this is going to be a really good starting point for you to determine roughly where you're at and where you need to get to. It might tell you that you're overweight and that in about 5 kilos time, if you were to be consistent with your diet, actually you'd be at a healthy weight. So it's a good starting point, but I wouldn't use it past that. Next, another acronym, BIA, and I always forget what this stands for. This stands for, I've written it down, Bioelectrical Impedance Analysis, and this is like either a handheld device or a scale, and what it does is it actually sends an electrical pulse through your body and it detects whether it is fat mass or lean body mass. So fat mass is all the fat you have, lean body mass is things like your muscle, bones, water, organs, that kind of thing, right? So it separates the two. I don't personally use this. I haven't used it before. I don't know many people that do use them. I think they're quite expensive as well. So personally, I wouldn't use that method. Next is DEXA or DXA. Again, this stands for Dual Energy X-ray Absorptiometry, whatever it stands for. Basically, this again is something similar to the BIA, but it's a lot more nuanced and it's going to give you a much more accurate reading. Never use one myself. I know a lot of competitive bodybuilders, professional athletes as well, use DEXA scans to determine their body fat percentage and their fat mass and their lean body mass. But I think you can only get these done in certain places, and I think they're quite expensive as well. So again, I wouldn't recommend it. You don't need to worry about too much, the real nuances of what your body fat percentage are, unless you're going to be stepping on stage. Then you might have a reasoning to use DEXA scan. And then lastly, I think most people do these. Photos. Alrighty. So photos every 4 to 6 weeks, front, back, side. Hopefully, typically, I would recommend doing it in the same variables. So same time, same clothing, same lighting, and same situation as much as possible, right? Every 4 to 6 weeks. And this is probably going to be one of the most important ones that you do, so that you can actually see a visual change with your results. Now, if I had to recommend, and I had a gun to my head, which ones I would recommend, I would do weighing every day, calories, I would do photos, and I would do training. These are the ones that I recommend the most. The rest of them are completely optional for you, but if you do want to do them, by all means, go for it. If you want more help with this, if you want some more ideas and ways to help track, we're just a little bit confused about how to actually go about starting your fat loss journey, I have a course that you can click in the description below. It is my 6-week Fat Loss Accelerator course. It helps you drop 5 to 10% of your body weight in 6 weeks. And it also gives you the tools, strategies, information, and knowledge that you need, that you must have for the next 30, 50 years of your journey, so that you can sustain fat loss. You can't just lose it, you need to sustain it as well. So you need both things. All right, hope that helped you. Peace out.